If you understand Dharma and you concentrate on building up your own character and your own awareness, and in every relationship you function from a position of compassion, the rest will take care of itself.
Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Vichaar Manthan podcast. Thank you once again to all of our listeners and to everyone that subscribed to our channels. Very interested to hear what you have to say. Please do email in on podcast@vicharmanthan.org. For those of you that heard episode 1 on exploring Dharma with Dr. Sachin Nandha, this is basically a follow-up. We had great feedback. People were very interested in what we had to say about Dharma, about exploring it, trying to understand it. It was deep. It was great. It wasn't necessarily religious. People, on the whole, provided positive feedback. So thank you for that. That's definitely needed, and that's definitely going to help us shape what the rest of the VM podcast looks like. Today, we bring back Sachin Ji to actually explore this a little bit further. So we've kind of explored the topic. Now we want to understand how. How do I do Dharma? And so anyone that doesn't quite understand Dharma just yet, go back, listen to episode 1, and then come back and listen to this episode here. Sachin Ji, welcome back.
Namaste. It's a real pleasure to be here, Sumit.
Brilliant. And so what kind of feedback did you get then from the first episode?
I received quite a few messages about, am I breathing? Am I doing yoga? Because that was my
your commitment.
How's
that going?
Yeah, not too bad. I've started doing a little bit of. I'm stretching a lot more. I'm definitely doing my Surya Namaskars much more regularly, and in my meditation, again, beginning to breathe and concentrate on that. So yeah, I'm getting there. It's a work in progress.
Okay, made the commitment. Go stick to that. Yeah. So anyone at home, message him, ask him how he's doing all that. Okay. So we went through trying to understand what Dharma is. I think we defined it well. But sort of a quick recap, if you will. It's a set of values, it's a set of principles that, if you are able to harness, enables you to flourish at an individual level, at a societal level, at really all levels. Do you think that kind of sums it up?
Absolutely. I think you've got it to a core. The Dharma is that which sustains our entire life, our entire way of being. And so effectively, you're absolutely correct. If you can harness these principles, you'll flourish. And if you stray from these principles, you'll diminish, you'll suffer.
And the more sort of Sanskrit definition of those is punyam and papam? Is that what we're talking about?
Correct, yes. So punyam is effectively where you reach higher states of consciousness, higher states of well-being. And remember, Dharma is the oldest pursuit of well-being. It's the oldest expression of well-being. So ultimately, every human being and every creature on this planet wants to live well and also die well, of course. And so Dharma effectively allows us. So punyam is that which allows you to reach higher states of consciousness and a more joyful state of mind. Papam is anything which leads you to the kleshas. So kleshas are basically the kind of lower states of mind, which are riddled with anger, lust, jealousy, envy, frustration, self-loathing, self-doubt, etc.
That's roughly positive and negative?
Broadly speaking, in the sense that a state of mind where I am constantly agitated and angry is inevitably going to affect the way in which I behave in the world negatively.
Sure.
Whereas a state of mind where I work with compassion, where I have a sense of camaraderie with my fellow being, I'm on the whole going to behave in a positive way.
Sure. And I think it's fair to say that all beings seek happiness. They want bliss and security. And so carrying out your dharma takes you closer to those peaceful states.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the interesting things is who was here? I mean, and I know we have cliches where we say, hey, I was born to be a banker, or I was born to be a footballer. Actually, very few people are born to do any of those sorts of things, right? We're born to effectively experience the richness of life,
Ah.
and hopefully embrace and have a joyful life. That's the purpose of life, to be joyful, to enjoy and be happy in life. Everything else is just secondary. It's a means to that end.
Yeah. Journey, not destination.
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's all great, and we've kind of discussed theory, right? But I think what our listeners, or certainly I would like to understand, is how we can take these principles into real life, daily life. And so if we look at daily life, generally people go to work, they have relationships, they have various hurdles, struggles, challenges throughout life. So maybe we can dive deep into one of those. And one key area of life, I think, is relationships. We have relationships with friends, family, blood relations, people we've never met. You meet someone on the bus and you have a good conversation with them. There's some bond there. Something has happened. You have vibrated at a similar frequency. I don't know. You get on with people. So relationships are a massive part of life. Think about growing up on the playground. Your work colleagues, you might not like them. You have a relationship with them. So let's try and discuss Dharma through the eyes of relationships.
Sure.
And maybe we can tackle issues that maybe come along the way with relationships. So let's define our terms. What is a relationship?
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a good place to begin. What I would say is we are social animals, right? Human beings are not evolutionarily designed to live in isolation, right? So yes, sure, a fragment of humanity has decided to live like hermits throughout its history, but that's the fringe. That's not the norm. So I assume we're talking about the norm, right?
Yeah,
The
general.
bulk of humanity. So in that case, we are social animals by design, and therefore, what does it mean to be social? What it means is that we enter from the moment we are born, from the moment we are conceived, we enter a web of relationships. We call that samsara, right? Where you end up without any say, without any choice, into this pre-existing socio-economic, socio-psychological sort of world where you have relationships with initially just a few people, so your mother, then your father, then your siblings, then your grandparents, so on, and that web expands and expands and expands. And by the time you're a mature adult, this web is so complicated, it's almost impossible to map. So effect that state of condition is what we all experience. So relationship is effectively where I have some sort of interdependence, physically, psychologically, emotionally, financially, whichever way. But in some sense, I have an interdependency with that other person. Soon as you have any sort of interdependency with anyone, with anything, you are entering a relationship. Now, a relationship is often constructed with a set of said and unsaid rules.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. The unsaid rules of our culture pre-COVID-19 was that when two strangers would meet or two friends would meet, they would do a handshake.
Yeah, shake hands.
You shake hands. And what does a shaking hands symbolize? It symbolizes literally that we're on the same side.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Yeah. We're together, right? We're friends, basically, right? It's a symbolism. But that doesn't work in certain other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Right? There they have a different set of rules that are unwritten.
Yeah.
So every relationship is defined and managed through a set of said rules and unsaid rules. Right?
Can we have another example of?
Yeah. So another rules is Sumiji, imagine on this podcast, I began to swear, effing blind, right? I am breaking the said rules of this podcast.
Sure.
Right? Because on the VM podcast, you have to have certain etiquette, right? Yeah. It's what I've been forced to have, right? So in that sense, there is a rule to engagement on this podcast with Sumiji.
Yeah.
My relationship with Sumiji will suffer if I break those rules.
Sure.
Right? So there is a classic example. For example, why do we say things like "Don't swear at your elders"? Be polite to your elders. What does that mean? It means they're saying that when you enter a relationship with somebody that's older than you, treat them with respect. Don't swear to them. Use proper English or a politer form of language. And thereby you'll have a healthy relationship. Meaning what? Meaning that when you enter that relationship with that elder and you play by the rules, you will have your needs satisfied. My needs could be emotional, security, it could be financial, it could be anything. But my needs will be satisfied. If I break those rules, my needs will remain unsatisfied.
So interdependence sounds like if I act or behave in a certain manner, said or unsaid, then what I require from this will be fulfilled. Loosely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, so let's just take our relationship, right? So we have a relationship, right, which goes back for several years, and this relationship, said or unsaid, is built on a set of constructs, right? There's a particular way in which you and I interact.
Sure.
Most of it was just done implicitly. However, you and I are a part of a particular culture. We're part of a British, Indian, Hindu culture.
Yeah.
So there are a certain set of etiquettes and cultural norms which shapes how you and I engage.
Okay.
Now we like that and we abide by it because you and I satisfy each other's needs in some sense, right? So for example, one of the things you always do when I meet you is you educate me about upcoming technology, right? You keep me current and you keep me up to date. And ironically, the amount of times where I come and see you where you've educated me, then I've gone to a dinner party or something and told others about what you've taught me, and they think I'm a genius. I'm really hip and modern, and I'm not. So you satisfy a certain need in that scenario, and likewise, I then hopefully, because the fact that we are good friends, there's something that I'm satisfying in you, whatever that might be. But we act in a way which is conducive to your growth and my growth.
Sure.
And it's not at the cost. My growth is not at the cost of your growth. So those become unhealthy relationships. Yeah. When one person diminishes, in fact, both people diminish when that happens.
And we will come on to some examples of, or at least we'll try to tackle some of the diminishing problems that society or relationships face. Interdependence sounds like not a bad word. There's something about that I'm not sure about. Why should one be dependent on another?
No, I mean, and that's an interesting framing of that question. So so it's not that why should one be interdependent at all. It's recognizing the fact that we are a social animal.
We are connected in some way.
We are connected in some way, whether we like it or not. That is just a matter of fact. The only way you can get out of this samsara is literally go and become a forest hermit where there will be no other human being around, and then your relationships will consist with only nature. Your relationship will be with nature and the elements of nature. Now, 99.99% of human beings don't want to live like that because we will not find the very thing that we seek, which is joy, love, happiness.
Connection.
Yeah. So actually, it's not that why should I? It's simply, if you want to be joyful and happy, you need to have satsang. We have this framework, right? Satsang. Sat meaning truth or pure or joyful, right? Sang meaning community. Yeah. So you need to have a good community, a flourishing community, in order for you to flourish as an individual.
Yeah. Sounds good. Let's look at some relationships then that might suffer. And let's see if we can, or let's see if you can, help me understand how Dharma can apply to that relationship.
We'll give it a shot. Let's have a go.
Okay, all right. Let's, just thinking off the top of my head, let's think about a family, an alcoholic father. Okay, so
nice and light to begin with.
Basic family setup, son, daughter, husband, wife, and the father in that relationship is drinking a lot of alcohol to the point that it's damaging for that family. And I don't know what that is. It's abusive. It could be financially, the general health, mentally, maybe physically, of that family is suffering, not in a good state. Alcoholic father. What does one do in that situation? How does Dharma help that family get out of this mess?
Wow.
With this alcoholic father?
Well, that's a super question and nice and deep straight away.
It probably happens a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sadly, it's become the peripheral side effect to modernity, hasn't it? Right, especially within certain communities, right, where alcoholism is very, very, very prevalent, especially amongst men. So okay, so how would a young son, daughter deal with an alcoholic father, right? If we were to apply dharma. So I suppose it's a very, very interesting first question that you bring up. Look, I would say this: if we apply dharma literally, and we're talking about here from the perspective of the son or daughter who is looking towards their father who is an alcoholic, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that situation, one immediately has to think about something very simple. What is your duty towards your father? Okay. How do you define duty towards your father? So there's a relationship there with your father. And in that relationship, there is always some sense of duty in any relationship. And these were those said and unsaid rules of that relationship that I alluded to earlier.
Sure.
So in this scenario, how do I know what my duty is towards my alcoholic father? Well, very simple. Duty is connected directly and proportionally to my responsibility. What is responsibility? Responsibility is your ability to respond to any given situation.
Sure.
So if I have the ability to respond appropriately to something, that automatically becomes my responsibility, right? Whether I acknowledge that or not, that's not the issue. The issue is basically you have the ability to do something, you should do it.
Sure.
Right? It's a compulsion. It's something that comes from within you. It's not an external pressure, right? So the first thing is let's understand what my ability is to respond to my alcoholic father. So am I 8 years old? If I'm an 8-year-old, my ability to respond is going to be very limited.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
But if I was 28 years old, you can all expect that actually my ability ought to be a lot greater.
Yeah.
Right?
You could most probably implement more change, do something about that.
Correct. Absolutely right. Right. And you're far more aware of the help and that you can get and you can get your father to have and all of that. Right. Okay. And of course, your relationship is hopefully far more mature. By that time, you're a bit more confident. You've experienced the world.
Well, if you've experienced your alcoholic father for the last 20 years,
correct. There may be baggage, scarring.
Skewed.
Correct. Exactly that. So I think that the thing about dharma is that it is a deeply personal thing that manifests within each unique situation according to that particular circumstances. So in this scenario, let's just pretend it's a 28-year-old young man who's seen his father become an alcoholic over the last 10 years,
Sure.
right? So between 18 and 28, saw his father, for whatever reason, drink more and therefore become a bit more abusive, and just erratic and so on and so forth.
Not a pleasant scenario.
Not a pleasant scenario. And I think a lot of people do suffer from this stuff, right? So one ought to be... So the first thing about dharma, before you can apply dharma anywhere, is awareness. Self-awareness. By self-awareness, I mean that first question. What is your ability? What can you really do? So let's just break that down. There's some things you can physically do, right? So you can physically get your father some help, right? So it could be pick up the phone and call the AA group, right? Call your local mandir, call your local gurudwara, right? And say, hey, here's a problem. Who do I go to for help? Right? That's a physical thing you could do. Anybody can do.
Yeah.
You just have to have the awareness to be able to do it. But then there's psychological things, right? Depending on the relationship that you have with your father, if it's already broken, then your ability is curbed. But if your relationship is on the whole fairly amicable, right? Then there is a lot more ability you have to influence your father.
And that if we just explore that amicable space for a moment, I would hope, or we would assume, that this alcoholic father is unable to recognize the problem they have. So there might be blimps of the non-alcoholic side of him, where he is his true self. He's perhaps trying, but clearly struggling in this moment.
Correct. Yeah, but what you'll find, though, is when you are experiencing from extreme cases, let's assume this is an extreme case.
Okay, sure.
Right? Because when we explore dharma through the extremities, you actually get a better understanding of dharma, right?
Yeah.
let's suppose, so when you are in that state of affairs, the person that is the victim of that problem, yeah, usually knows that they are in a vicious negative cycle.
Stuck in a rut.
They're stuck in a rut. They know it. They may not articulate it, but they know it, generally. Now,
half of that, though, is accepting that.
yeah, correct. Absolutely right.
And that will come with its own set of insecurities and challenges.
Correct. 100%. So my only point here is as the 28-year-old young man looking at his alcoholic father, he has to be aware, self-aware, that what is his ability to really do anything. Now, depending on my ability to influence my father psychologically, physically, i.e., do I physically pick up the phone and get him help? Then do I convince him to take that help? Right, all of that stuff. Do I walk with him to see the doctors, to see to kind of see therapists, counselors? What does he need? What is the thing that has caused the alcoholism in the first place? Right? What kind of pain, suffering has he been going through for him to get into this state in the first place? Anyway, so that depends on the 28-year-old's awareness, ability.
Yeah.
Okay.
What they know of the world.
Correct. Their duty, therefore, is directly proportional to their ability to respond.
Okay.
So it's very simple here. If you are a highly capable 28-year-old and you know you can help your father, right? It is your duty and you are compelled to help your father through whatever it may be that you are able to do.
And you might not know what to do.
Correct.
But you should be able to recognize within you that you can, you should, you ought.
Correct.
And then go figure out what those things are.
Correct. But now let's suppose that actually my relationship with my father is already broken.
Yeah.
It's already broke. We hardly talk. When we talk, we argue. We fight. Right? There's no respect. The mutual respect is gone.
That connection, that relationship
is broken.
Yeah.
It's broken. You can just say it's broken. But because you are blood relations, right? And you might live under the same house, or you might visit that house once every weekend. And society tells you that's your father over there.
Yeah.
You are compelled by external constructs to maintain a relationship. But the actual relationship is hollowed out. Yeah. It's finished. Right? There is no real relationship there. Okay, if that's the case, then you have to look at it, again, no pun intended, but with a sober reality. You have to stare reality, and in the face and say, right, the relationship with my father is already gone. It's finished. There is no mutual respect. It's gone, right? Now, your ability to influence his welfare is significantly diminished.
Right.
Significantly diminished. So all you can do now is your duty as a son in this scenario is that you can find the next person with whom he does have a beneficial mutual relationship with. The mother, uncles, aunts, grandparents, anyone.
Right.
And act through them. Because you may have the ability to highlight to them the real situation of your father's demise, gradual demise with alcoholism. So here you see, Dharma tells you that my duty isn't to directly help him, but is to indirectly help him. So Dharma tells us in a very nuanced way, depending on your ability to respond to that situation, you decide what is your duty, what level you have to fulfill your duty by, right? So that's kind of, and sometimes people say, well, that's still vague. Well,
every situation is unique.
Every situation is unique, and that's the beauty of Dharma, right? You have to understand and become self-aware in the first place of who you are, what your baggages are, what your trauma is with your alcoholic father. Because you have trauma too, right?
Yeah. Okay, you were saying a moment ago about if the relationship is not there, it's hollowed out. Is there a point at which you walk away?
Correct. Yes, there is. There is always a point in Dharma where you get to a point where you realize that the human being in front of me, who I call my father,
because of social construct,
and because he played a part in my birth, but there is no relationship there. There is not a single need that he satisfies in me, and there's not a single need that I satisfy in him. And therefore, that relationship is finished. It's gone, right? In that situation, it's an extreme situation.
Yeah.
But in that situation, yes, Dharma tells you that you do not have the ability, any ability, to respond to this situation. All you can do is be the conduit for somebody else to help him. all you can do is highlight to somebody else who might be able to help him, and say, help him. And that's it. Then you have to walk away.
It's like saying, do your best.
It is like saying do your best, but a bit more than that. In the sense that...
Do better than your best.
Well,
Try.
Well, try. But it's more like that. It's more than do your best. It is do your best, but it's do your best, but from this sense of duty that emerges out of you. Right? For example, I want to go running. Going for a run every morning, right, is not... It may be a duty to myself.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Promised you would.
Correct, right? So that's a duty to myself and my well-being. Fine. But if I'm interested in in the relationship with my father, and I want him to have well-being, but I don't have the ability to respond, then actually I can do a lot more for my mother, with whom I do have a relationship, but with my father, I don't. And so therefore, one can say, I'm going to have to walk away from my father, not out of any guilt. There should be no guilt. There should be no baggage. There should be no shame. It's just simply that the relationship is hollowed out, but you owe it to that relationship and to yourself and to Dharma. The Dharma will compel you to find him some help.
Right.
But then remember, you are only 50%. The other 50% is his kartavya, his responsibility. What is his ability to respond? What is his ability to recognize his own problems? Right? So there is only so much help you can give someone, but ultimately they have to receive and take that help. If that side is blocked completely, well, then they're not going to get better. And it's not that you failed in your duty as a son.
Yeah,
of course not.
There's only so much you can do.
There's only so much you can do. And you should be sober and reasonable and rational. And that's why in the Gita it says that you work, but not for the fruits of your labor.
And be attached. So if it doesn't pan out and everything you've tried to do doesn't necessarily work,
that's the way life is.
Yeah.
Right? And you should have sthit pragna, right? Equanimity. So if I try my best with my father and he gets some help, and after 2 years he's no longer an alcoholic, brilliant, well done, celebrate, good job. But if I try my best and for whatever reason, there is no difference, in fact it's getting worse and worse and worse, at some point a time comes when you have to recognize that I am not the person through which my father will get better, and therefore it is up to somebody else to do this. Now, if the father himself doesn't want to get better, they've gone beyond the event horizon, they've gone beyond the pale, right? Then I'm afraid you have to, Dharma tells you that you should be, the reason why we say this, you should be detached from the outcomes of your labor for this reason. Because you don't have the ability to respond.
Yeah.
So what are you worried about?
Okay.
Right? It's easier said than done, of course, but this takes practice, this takes awareness. Perseverance. And of course, our culture has given us techniques to build this character. Because remember, when I talk about ability, do you have the ability to respond? If you remember from the first episode, ability means two things: skills and character. So perseverance, determination, compassion, these are character traits.
Okay.
But skills are my ability to communicate, my ability to pick up the phone and get help, my ability to network, right? My ability to be firm, my ability to be disciplined, so on and so forth, right? They're skills. So when skills and character come together, they form ability.
Okay. We've looked at a parent-child scenario there. Let's look at another major relationship that people have with their spouse. So again, picking a random topic here. Let's say young couple, right? Man and wife. And this wife has now got a shopping problem. And I'm not just saying she likes to shop, and this is all very stereotypical, but it will help us understand through this extreme example. Now, this lady is shopping too much. It's causing financial burden on the family. Maybe as a couple, they are arguing more, and she's buying things she doesn't need or can't afford, and it's causing stress in various ways in this couple's marriage. What can that husband do? How can he apply Dharma to help his wife who has a shopping problem? And I suppose the problem isn't in the shopping. That's probably the manifestation of something deeper going on, right? I don't know what that might be, insecurity or whatever. What can he do? How does Dharma help him?
So again, there, right? So in that husband-wife scenario, if we can just frame it that way
Yeah.
for this example, right? One has a relationship with the other person, a spouse especially, when both are interested in each other's flourishing. Both are interested, both are living together, they're married for goodness sake, because they believed that the best out of me will come with this person next to me.
Yeah. Grow together, live together.
Right? That's what marriage is. Okay. So if that was the principle upon which they got married, then it then translates that actually the first thing one ought to do is work from a place of preet. Right? So heat, meet, preet. Right? Dharma informs us of these things.
In a compassionate manner.
Preet is compassionate. Right? So one should come from a position of compassion. What is compassion? Compassion is not just me looking at the world from the other person's perspective. That's empathy. But actually, compassion is where I am that person. Right? That I see myself in that person. Right? And there's a sense of oneness there. Okay? So if I'm acting from that position, and that's intention, when it comes to dharma and applying dharma, intention is everything.
Right.
Outwardly, what you do is actually secondary. Intention is very important. So the intention must come from a sense of compassion. Okay, given that that's the case in this example, right? Then the question becomes is, well, okay, I'll go back to that. What is my duty towards my wife to help her to help us to re-manage our finances? Okay. Right? So in your scenario, we are living beyond our means. Mm-hmm. We are struggling financially, and therefore, I assume in your example, it's causing other triggers.
Yeah. So
pressure,
shopping. Like I said, shopping is probably the outward manifestation of bigger problems.
Yeah, but I assume though that shopping is causing other financial stresses and pressures and anxieties in the household, right? Yeah. And affecting other relationships, right? So in that scenario, my first and foremost point is, how did we get there? Right? But let's assume I was away. Let's assume that in this scenario, I'm the husband and I was away for 2 years working, used to come once on the weekend, didn't really pick anything up. But now that I moved back to the country or back to the city, I'm living with my wife again and I'm seeing that there is a problem here, right? Okay. I'm seeing the problem. In that scenario, again, it's an extreme scenario.
That's extreme. Well, maybe this husband didn't realize it's a problem. Maybe just one day it dawned on him, like, oh my God, okay, this is actually a thing. So that awareness has happened now.
Okay, fine. So in that scenario, the first thing he has to say is, well, okay, hold on. What is my ability to do something about this?
Right.
Be self-aware first.
Cut the credit cards up.
Your credit cards. What about her credit cards, right? So like my point here is what's your ability not to solve the problem because you don't know what the problem is? What's your ability to even understand the problem?
Sure.
Right? So number one is...
And be interested in that.
And be interested in that.
Because it is for the benefit of the pair.
Correct. It's the pair. Exactly that. Everything, that intention, that this is about us. She is not the problem. We are the problem. Or the circumstances are the problem. Yeah. She is the victim of those circumstances. Right? So within Dharma philosophy, right? Generally, broadly speaking, we are all victims of samsara.
Okay.
Right? What does that mean? It goes back to what I said earlier. We are in a web of relationships. We are in a web of circumstances.
She might have a friend that's shopping loads and that's rubbing off on her, and that's...
Correct. And it could also simply be that you don't know this, but at work, she is having incredibly difficult time at work. There could be all sorts of issues going on at work.
Or something happened in childhood that makes her insecure, and as a result, shopping, she feels like... Or pacifies that insecurity. Perhaps.
Correct. It could be so many different things, right? Yeah. So Dharma doesn't worry about any of that. It just says, are you coming from the right place? So it's us, not her.
Yeah.
She is not the cause of this. The circumstances are the cause of this. Samsara is the cause of this. Okay. Now, what is my duty towards her and her well-being? Okay. Then that gets to a point of what is my responsibility? That comes to what is my ability to respond. Therefore, now, what is my personal character like? You see, Dharma always boils down to your character.
Wow.
Right? What is your character like? Are you patient with her? Are you honest with her?
Yeah.
Do you have integrity yourself?
Yeah.
Are you saving money yourself? Are you patient? Are you loving towards her, or are you making her feel complete and whole?
Yeah.
Right. So your character becomes front and center in dharma, because that drives your ability to respond.
Okay.
Then the second thing is your skills, right? Your skills to help her. Are you the right man to help her, or does she need counseling?
Yeah.
If she needs counseling, do you have the communication skills to educate and help your wife? Look, maybe you need counseling. Why don't we both go together?
Yeah.
Why don't we get this help? Right? Do you have that ability to talk like that, or to communicate in a way that she will respond to?
And if you don't, then build that
Then
character,
build it.
and that might take some time. And
Correct. And that's patience.
And you might need to go through your own hurdles to build the character to then have the ability to respond.
Correct. Absolutely. Right. And so it's a journey. It's a journey. It's not a solution. Dharma doesn't give you a solution. It gives you that journey, and it builds fortitude, right, in you, right? That idea that actually the right things will manifest from life if so I sow the right seeds, if so I behave appropriately. So behavior is driven by your intent and your ability.
And don't hold the other necessarily responsible. So be forgiving in your nature also.
Forgiveness is probably one of the most compassion, right? So forgiveness is a part of that compassionate being. That actually this person themselves is caught up in the web of samsara.
Yeah.
Right? There are so many multitude. It's such a complex web that nobody can unravel it. Yeah. Right? So therefore you look at it and you go, okay, you are caught up in the web. I'm caught up with you because I am connected to you. Right? Yeah. We have a deep relationship. Therefore, it's in your interest to take her out of that web, right? And build a more healthier web. So again, a couple of things. What do you do in that scenario? Every human being. So while you're looking at your character, your ability, you also have to reflect on their ability, right? Does your wife have the right character trait? Well, clearly, if they're a shopaholic, then there's some character flaws, right? There's also some issue around, their sense of self, security, or etc. Right? Okay, you got to look at their role models. Who does your wife look up to? What sort of social media handles are they on? Got to look at the ecosystem in which they live. Your job is to influence that ecosystem and change it. So one big thing we have, again, within the Dharma traditions, it's, again, I keep saying it, it's satsang.
Right.
The idea of a holistic, wholesome, if that's the word I can use, wholesome environment, right? So are her friends prudent with their money? Is her lifestyle congruent with some of the values that she might propound or propose, right, to you? So you have to look at all of her well-being, not just you and her.
Yeah.
Because her world is bigger than you,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
There's a whole wide world out there. So you have to be able to...
Shock horror to some people.
Yes, maybe. Absolutely. I can imagine, right? So you have to then therefore think, okay, what kind of friend circles are we hanging around with? So one basic thing is, why is it, and this is not rocket science, right? Why is it when people are at their lowest, alcoholism, financial difficulties, right, deep insecurities, that they find religion? Why? Why do they find religion at that moment? Nobody thinks about religion when they're on top of the world, when they're in a state of happiness and the world is going towards them and they feel like the masters of the universe.
Yeah.
Everybody finds religion when they're low, when they're poor, when they are defeated, or they feel as if life has got the better of them. Because religion gives you a sense of community. Religion gives you a sense of forgiveness. Religion gives you a sense of well-being.
On the whole.
So that's why often, satsang is important, right? Change your environment, change your ecosystem.
Go spend time with a couple that is doing well.
Yeah, or leads a very simple life.
Yeah.
They don't need 5 cars. They don't need to go on 3 holidays a year. They don't need to have that extension that they can't afford, right? Because so many couples suffer from this, right? That all of their friend circles get an extension done. Then they somehow feel incomplete, that somehow we are not wholesome, we are not completed as a pair if we don't get our extension. My best friend and his wife have bought a BMW and she drives a little Porsche, right? Oh my God, I drive a little Toyota. Somehow now I feel incomplete. Well, that tells you something about you, my friend. right? Not them, you. So if you can recognize that and go, actually, I don't need to do that. So maybe go and hang around with couples that also drive Toyotas for a while, right? Who are also happy, perfectly content and happy in their lives. So learn to adjust your environment. So Dharma would tell you that's something that's well within your hands.
Okay.
But likewise, though, if it's an extreme example where you're on the verge of bankruptcy, you have to decide at that point, does your wife have the ability in this scenario to ever recover from this?
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And if that extreme example happens where you decide and you realize that, my God, this is beyond help. This is beyond my ability, my character. I just don't have the character for this. Like, you have a choice. You either have the patience, so you have some part of the character, but if you're impatient, you want instant results, you're not willing to go on the journey with her, then you are going to suffer until you cut and destroy your relationship.
Wow.
And therefore, we live in a society where you have so many broken marriages, right? 50% divorce rates.
That is correct.
Yeah, 50%. Yeah. Why is that? It's mostly, and people don't get divorced because of the extreme stuff. Most people get divorced because they, inverted commas, fall out of love.
Yeah.
Right? Which is another way of saying that the relationship that I entered, which was fulfilling me, is no longer fulfilling me.
Yeah.
Therefore, I want out. But I would say I'll be frank, I'll say how it is. Most relationships break down because there is a serious lack of character in the people in that relationship.
Okay.
But if they were self-aware of that lack of character within themselves and the other, they would actually work together.
They might be able to do something about that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's forgive the spending wife. You've got a friend. They occasionally smoke some marijuana, and that occasional is now frequent, and you see your friend falling from that wholesome state. They are no longer themselves. They essentially have a drug problem. How do you help your friend? So this is a different relationship, right? We've done parent, child, we've done spouse. A friend now, right? You're not related by blood or anything like that.
No, again, these all have a similar DNA to them, right? And that similar DNA is that effectively, there are external circumstances, the samsara in which they have entered, choosingly or unknowingly. They may have meandered into it, right? Not out of any sense of consciousness, right? So as you said, my friend occasionally smoked a joint. It then became a bit more frequent. His friend circles changed. His social habits changed.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's smoking 5 times a day. He's always high. But you see, that's going to have real world consequences. They're lethargic.
Yeah.
They're sleepy. They're not congruent. They're not motivated. They can't work. So there are physical reactions, right? So now they are in a diminishing world. They are diminishing constantly in their being. Also, the other thing with intoxicants, a bit like the alcoholic father, is that these things inevitably lead to the kleshas, right?
And something like this wouldn't necessarily happen overnight.
It's a slow decay. It's a slow decay,
and it's not something that you can necessarily realize either.
No.
The guy smoking the weed probably thinks he's on top of the world.
For a while.
Okay.
But then they realize that there is a form of addiction. They do realize that actually without this particular joint every hour, I feel poor. I feel rubbish. I don't feel wholesome. And therefore the joint momentarily patches that up. Then they go again. And that's how addictions form, right? Like you don't feel wholesome in yourself. So you need this external scoping, some escapism, whatever it might be. Right. So therefore they're already in this negative cycle. Now you as a friend, okay, very simply put, yes, of course, as a friend, you have a relationship with that person and you are, again, both there to satisfy each other's needs as friends, right? It could be belonging. It could be that we're both football fans. We both play football together, whatever. But there'll be a set of needs. The moment your friend who is smoking marijuana all day, every day, the moment he or she stops fulfilling your needs, you'll recognize it and you'll wake up. And you'll say, oh my God, I don't like them anymore. Okay. They've changed. They've become bad.
And that's not a bad thing necessarily.
Well, no, it's not a bad thing. But notice, none of these things, this intention is from a bad place. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. If the only time I recognize, right, that Sumit is, I don't like him anymore, he's changed, right, is because we used to play football 3 times a week, he used to keep me fit, and I used to really have a good time playing football with him. Yeah.
And now he's too busy for that.
And now he's too busy smoking marijuana on the street corner day in, day out, and he's no longer coming to football, right? Now I recognize that Sumit's changed. Now I recognize, oh, Sumit's doing bad things, right? Well, hold on a second.
Till then, it was fine.
Till then, it was fine. Why? Because you were still getting your fix, and your fix was Sumit's company. Your fix was Sumit's footballing skills.
So it's that web, isn't it? We all have interdependencies to each other.
Correct.
So a friend to a friend. So if you're no longer being a friend, right, then they're going to quickly realize
their relationship will decay.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if your relationship decays, a true friend recognizes out of dharma principles, not reactions to the outside world, but principles. So let's just take that friend, right? I have a friend X. We played football together. We were getting along really well.
Yeah.
We were satisfying each other's needs.
Yeah. Company.
If the first time I recognize that he has a problem is when he no longer turns up to football, and now I don't like him for it, or now I think he's changed, well, yes, the relationship is finished because it's no longer a friendship.
Yeah.
There's no longer any flourishing there for each other, right? There's no giving and taking. It's all gone. Yeah. It's hollowed out.
But your taking was just that he came to football.
Correct. So your entire basis of your friendship was quite shallow and fickle anyway.
Right.
Right. And by the way, let's be honest about this, right? And I'm happy to say it to our listeners, in my view, most relationships are quite fickle. Most relationships are quite fickle in human life, which is why they're so transient. Very few people.
We give and take.
We give and take. It's transactional.
We're only happy whilst we're getting our side.
And that's because we don't act from a sense of heat, meet, and breathe. Breathe especially. Our friendships, our relationships, all of them should be built from a sense of compassion, first and foremost. And because our relationships are not built from compassion, they are built out of need. They're built out of this transactional relationship. So when that transaction stop or they diminish, the relationship automatically moves on. It hollows out and it moves on.
And we should be humble and mature enough to recognize that happens.
Yes.
And I think, I've had friends that are no longer friends. But it's not like I don't like them anymore.
Correct.
Yeah, it's amicable.
Correct.
It's
it's gone.
I see you once a year. That's fine. I still wish the best for you, but
correct.
We don't talk every day.
Not everybody can be your soulmate. Right? That's okay.
You can't be everyone's best friend.
You can't be everyone's best friend. And that's okay, right? Relationships will come, relationships will go. However, there are some relationships that are sacred.
Yeah.
Those relationships are the ones where you work and you function out of compassion.
Yeah.
When that happens, those relationships are lifelong.
Yeah. You only have a handful of.
You only have a handful of them,
lifelong friends,
and that's all you need. So if you just go back to your kind of I suppose marijuana example, right? If as a true friend, out of compassion, Dharma tells me that Dharma informs me that when my friend starts smoking marijuana, I should have, in the first instance, had the courage, the awareness, and the compassion to flag it up to him and say, hey, what on earth are you doing? Why are you experimenting with this stuff? What are you doing? What's the real issue? What's going on? Right? And then out of compassion, you would look after him, right? In the sense that, okay, he's done it once, experimental, fine. Done it twice, done it thrice, done it 4 times. He's now doing it daily, weekly. At what stage do you as a friend realize there's a problem here? And it's no longer just experimental, right? Way before that, if you were conscious, if you were cognizant, and you were working from a place of compassion, it would have been your duty to change the course of action of your friend.
As much as you can.
As much as you can.
Not to.
By first and foremost, giving that awareness to him.
Yeah.
And I would guarantee that when most human beings have awareness, as Krishnamurti so wonderfully tells us, the best solution to the problems of samsara is by flagging up the course of direction that they're in before they enter it.
And you've got to be courageous enough to do that.
You have to be courageous enough to do that, because we live in a world now where people lack the character to be told the truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Offense is taken too often.
Yeah. Who are you to judge me? Who are you to tell me what to do? Right? This sort of reaction comes out. And so sadly, the world has become fickle and a bit fragile, right? But in true friendship, one ought to be able to deliver bad news equally as much as good news to your friend.
And you know who a true friend is, someone that will listen to your bad news and celebrate your good news with you.
I would agree with that. And I think Dharma informs all of that for us, right? So there's a notion of compassion, there's a notion of eat, meet, breathe, but there's also this compassion, there's a notion of responsibility and duty, right? And ultimately is this, how do you know whether, the next classic example is, how do you know whether actually marijuana is bad for you? And they get into this sort of philosophizing, right? It's very simple, right? Does that act lead them to become a better human being or a diminished human being? I promise you, anybody who smokes marijuana regularly, daily, weekly, in some sense, is going to diminish themselves, right? And that in itself should tell you that, okay, maybe there are other things you can do with your time that will help you flourish, that will help you grow. Why aren't you doing those? So inevitably, it's not a matter of judgment, by the way. Dharma informs us not to judge, because the moment you judge, you're not acting out of compassion. But it does tell you to be aware, to be cognizant of your body, of your mind, of your relationship, right? And why both of your interdependence, that interdependence again, is a healthy thing. It's a good thing.
Yep.
And we grow together.
Yeah, we live and learn together. Okay, right. So we've done father, we've done spouse, we've done friend. Now, another big relationship people have is their offspring, their children. And so how can Dharma help parents with, say, their children? With, classic, right? Parent says, my child doesn't listen to me. And take it to the extremity, that's now a problem in that household. What can that parent do to help their child? How does Dharma help them?
Here, I always like to start off with, and I would recommend it to all our listeners to go and read Gibran's poem on children, right? So Khalil Gibran, the prophet, wrote a poem called Children. And, a great starting point is to recognize as parents that our language deceives us. When we say things like your children, Gibran says it beautifully. Your children are not your children. So what does that mean? It basically means, yes, look, and in fact, he says in the next line, which is that they come through you, but not from you. Right? So yes, okay, you gave birth to your children, right? Okay, great. But you are stewards for their well-being.
Yeah,
you don't own them, right? You don't own them. They are their own individuals. They have their own destinies. They have their own samsar, right? They have their own temperaments, their own kleshas. They have their own papam and punyam, right? They have their own abilities. And every child is different. Every child is unique, right? So parents are stewards of that potential. If you can see yourself, first and foremost, as a steward of the child that you have been, by samsar, given the opportunity to raise, you are a steward. Your job is to bring out the best of them and best of their abilities. But guess what? You don't decide what their abilities are. Life decides what their abilities are, what their character will be, what their skills will be. You can nurture, you can shape, you can guide, you can advise. You cannot dictate. You cannot own, right? And as a parent, a lot of parents suffer from guilt the moment they have children, I find, right? Like so many mothers and fathers feel, I'm talking about my own friends here, feel as if they are never good enough for their child, right? Oh, if my child does something bad, it's because I'm a bad parent.
Yeah, you see a lot of that.
You see a lot of that, right? And that's a narrative that kind of comes out in modern society. Well, that's just not just, that's ridiculous. That is so irrational. It's unbelievable to me, right? And I don't have any children, so I can say that, right? But how is it that whatever your child does, that is a reflection of you.
Yeah, but then that's a problem with the parent who may be trying to live now through their child.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Like, as if a individual had a dream to, say, become a footballer, they couldn't achieve that, they couldn't realize that, and now they want their child to become a footballer to fulfill their dreams, and that child doesn't want to go play football.
Or they don't have the ability to do it.
Or the ability. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the first thing is that thing about what I said about stewardly. That's why the first thing I said is, if you want to raise good children, dharmic children, you have to stop owning them. You have to stop living through them. And you have to stop judging yourself through their actions.
Right. Yeah, you'll
Right?
see that a lot. Right?
You see that all the time.
You see it if there is an individual who, I don't know, gets into crime or whatever, you blame the parents.
You blame the parents instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly, right? Now, and the second thing is, we live in a world where mothers and fathers are constantly competing with each other to be better parents or to be better, sort of compared to their friends.
Yeah.
So, for example, oh, my friend sent the child to that school. Oh my God, we better send him to a better school.
Yeah.
My friends buy their children this brand of clothes. Oh my God, we better dress our children in this sort of. And so, look, without being overt, covertly, there is a keeping up with the Joneses going on. What's going on here? What's going on is that you are living your life through your child.
Yeah.
They are not yours to be that you are, in some sense, I think, in a character sense, parents that do that are mutating the characters of their children.
Yeah. And then that has potentially disastrous effects on the child. So that child that doesn't have the ability to play football, not interested in football, then feels like they are a failure to their parents because I couldn't become a footballer, I couldn't become a pianist, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that guilt carries on. So you started off with the guilt, you passed that guilt on to them. So we're all scarring each other. And so this is a relationship that is adharmic, in the sense that this relationship is no longer conducive to each other's flourishing. Yeah. If anything, we are burdening with each other with guilt. And so it becomes a negative feedback loop instead of creating a positive feedback loop.
Right? Children like plants, you give them what they need to grow. Sun, water, nutrients.
Absolutely. And I think that is the best analogy when you understand dharma and raising children, I find, or just dealing with young people. See them as, if we saw them as seeds of potential, right? And given the right environment, they will flourish by themselves. For example, take a plant. You said it yourself, right? Just a minute ago. When you get a plant, now, if you are a cognizant plant grower, what that plant needs to grow healthy. So it needs a bit of water at the right time, needs the right temperature, and needs the right amount of sunlight. But the growing itself...
It does itself.
You don't
tell the plant to grow into a plant.
Correct. And then you don't get upset if the flower you wanted was white, but instead it's come out as white with a little shade of pink. Yeah. You don't get upset about that. That's just a plant.
The plant's nature was
plant's nature.
In that way.
So your child is the same. All you can do is give them the best topsoil in which they can get all the nutrients psychologically as well as physically. You can instill them with a sense of duty, dharma, all of that. Make them aware children, right? Very aware of themselves and the world. But the growing, samsara will take care of. Yeah. That's not for you to control. And I think sometimes if we just maintain that balance, that sense of detachment, that sense that, look, I am a steward of this child, I think that would really set the stage to have healthy relationships with our children.
So fulfill your duty, but don't be attached.
Correct.
Right? Because that child's going to grow up one day and flee the nest.
Absolutely.
Right? Go out and live.
Absolutely. And of course, that child, if nurtured correctly, will automatically be self-aware that as his or her parents' ability diminishes, as we get older, we diminish. Yeah. So as we get older and our abilities diminish, they will automatically ought to have a rising sense of ability, therefore responsibility, therefore duty to look after the parents. Brilliant. It's a natural, positive feedback loop.
So Dharma are those principles that, if you can harness, will allow you to flourish at an individual level, family, society, and all forms of relationship. I think on the whole, we've discussed a variety of relationships that people go through. Your parents, your spouse, your friend, and your children. I'm sure there are plenty of other relationships out there that maybe we'll explore one day. We won't do a quick fire round because you were very fortunate to have that before. But any parting thoughts, any nuggets, any golden nuggets you'd like our listeners to take away from this?
I think, by the way, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and of course, I should add the disclaimer here to all our listeners that, look, I'm neither married, I have no children, right? But I have umpteenth different types of relationships. So that's at least something we can say, right?
So you claim not to be the expert.
I claim not to be
but
the
that's
expert.
fine because Dharma guides.
Dharma guides, right? And so all one has to remember is this: Dharma is the pursuit of well-being. If you want to live well, you want to pursue Dharma, you want to understand Dharma. If you understand Dharma and you concentrate on building up your own character and your own awareness, and in every relationship, you function from a position of compassion, the rest will take care of itself.
Brilliant. Golden words by Sachin Ji there. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast once more and helping us understand Dharma, and in this episode particularly, how we can apply that specifically to relationships. We'll probably have to explore other areas of life at some point to do with work life and the rest. Thank you very much, Sachin Ji.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me again.
Brilliant. This was the VM podcast. My name is Sumit Sharma. Again, very interested to hear your thoughts. Please do email me. Please do share this episode with your friends and family and anyone really that's interested in a wholesome approach to life. I look forward to bringing another episode of the VM podcast to your ears. Namaste.